On July 10th, 1998, in Jacksonville, Florida, 8-hour-old Kamiyah Mobley vanished from her mother's hospital room, stolen by a stranger dressed as a nurse. For 18 years, Kamiyah lived under a different name in a different state, believing a kidnapper was her mother. The truth emerged only after an anonymous tip reached the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. But here is what makes this story impossible to forget. When police finally found Kamiyah, she defended the woman who stole her. She called her Mama. This is the story of a teenage mother's worst nightmare, a kidnapper's desperate deception, and the phone call that shattered 2 decades of lies. University Medical Center sat on the edge of downtown Jacksonville, its beige walls familiar to the thousands of families who passed through each year. So on the morning of July 10th, 1998, 16-year-old Kamiyah Mobley lay in a hospital bed on the maternity floor, exhausted but overwhelmed with joy. 8 hours earlier, she had given birth to a healthy baby girl. She named her Kamiyah Teresia Tasha Mobley. Kamiyah was young, barely past her own childhood, but she had already begun planning a future for her daughter. She imagined first steps, first words, first days of school. Her own mother had come to the hospital earlier that morning, and relatives were already fighting over who would babysit and who would teach Kamiyah her ABCs. The baby's father, Craig Aiken, was not present. He was incarcerated at the time, but Kamiyah had hoped that he would be part of their daughter's life when he was released. The hospital room was quiet that afternoon. Kamiyah dozed between feedings, or the summer heat pressing against the window. Kamiyah slept in the bassinet beside her, swaddled in a pink blanket with a tiny hospital cap covering her dark hair. Around 3 p.m., a woman in blue floral scrubs entered the room. The woman smiled warmly. She introduced herself as a nurse and said she had been assigned to help Kamiyah with the baby. She was friendly, patient, asking Kamiyah about her pregnancy and her plans for motherhood. For hours, she stayed in the room, chatting, helping, blending seamlessly into the rhythm of hospital life. Kamiyah trusted her. Why wouldn't she? The woman wore the uniform. She knew the procedures. She acted like she belonged. Just after 3 p.m., the woman told Kamiyah that Kamiyah had a slight fever. She needed to take the baby to another part of the hospital for a quick examination. Kamiyah hesitated for only a moment. The woman had been so helpful, so kind. "I'll bring her right back," the woman promised, lifting Kamiyah gently from the bassinet. Kamiyah watched her daughter disappear through the door. The woman turned left, toward the elevator. Kamiyah's tiny face was the last thing Kamiyah saw. 5 minutes passed, then 10, then 30. Kamiyah called for a nurse, a real nurse this time. The woman in the floral scrubs had not returned. No one on the floor recognized the description Kamiyah gave. Security reviewed the cameras, but the footage was grainy, inconclusive. The woman had simply walked out of the hospital with a newborn baby in her arms, and no one had stopped her. By 4 p.m., the hospital was in chaos. Alarms sounded, doors were sealed. Police swarmed the maternity ward, interviewing every staff member, or every visitor, every patient. Kamiyah's screams echoed down the hallway as the truth settled over her like a weight she would carry for the next 18 years. Her daughter was gone, stolen, and no one knew where. The Jacksonville Sheriff's Office launched one of the largest investigations in the city's history. Detectives fanned out across the region, following every lead, chasing every tip. The FBI joined the search within days. The National Center for Missing and Exploited Children distributed flyers with the only photograph police had of Kamiyah, a grainy image taken shortly after birth. Because she was so young, investigators had to create a digital composite of what she might look like as she grew. They distributed sketches alongside physical descriptions: Mongolian spots on her skin an umbilical hernia, distinctive birthmarks. Over the following months, more than 2,500 tips flooded the hotline. Each one was investigated. Each one led nowhere. Kamiyah Mobley gave interview after interview, pleading for her daughter's return. She appeared on local news, then national broadcasts. She begged the kidnapper to bring Kamiyah home. "Please," she said into the cameras, her voice cracking. "Just give me back my baby. I won't press charges. I just want to hold her again." But the woman in the floral scrubs had vanished as completely as if she had never existed. Police theorized that she had been watching the hospital for days, choosing her target, studying the routines. She had planned this abduction with precision, and she had succeeded. Years passed. The investigation slowed, then stalled. New leads trickled in, but none produced results. Kamiyah graduated from a high school. She went to college. She had other children, but she never forgot her firstborn. She kept Kamiyah's photograph on her dresser, a ghost in a frame. Every July 10th, she lit a candle. Every birthday, she wondered, "Where is my daughter? Is she alive? Does she know she is missing?" The answer was no. Kamiyah did not know. 400 miles away, in Walterboro, South Carolina, a woman named Gloria Williams was raising a daughter she called Alexis Kelly Manigo. To everyone who knew them, Gloria was a devoted mother. Alexis was a bright, happy child who attended school, made friends, and lived a seemingly normal life. No one suspected the truth. No one questioned Gloria's story that she had given birth to Alexis in Georgia, that the father was no longer in the picture, that the two of them had moved to South Carolina for a fresh start. Gloria Williams had her own history of heartbreak. In the years before the abduction, she had suffered multiple miscarriages. Just 1 week before she walked into that Jacksonville hospital, she had lost another pregnancy. The grief was unbearable. She later told investigators that she had driven to Florida in a state of desperation, not fully planning what she would do. But when she saw Kamiyah Mobley's baby, something inside her snapped. She wanted that child. She needed that child. And she took her. If you have ever experienced a loss so profound that it distorted your sense of right and wrong, you know how desperation can make monsters of ordinary people. Gloria forged documents to create a new identity for Kamiyah. She raised her with love, with care, and with all the outward signs of a normal mother-daughter relationship. But beneath the surface, the lie festered. Kamiyah grew up with questions she could not answer. Why did she look nothing like her mother? Why could Gloria never produce a birth certificate? Why did their stories about her birth change depending on who was asking? By the time Kamiyah reached her teenage years, she had begun to suspect the truth. She confronted Gloria, demanding answers. And finally, Gloria told her. She admitted that she had taken Kamiyah from a hospital in Florida when she was only hours old. Kamiyah's world collapsed. Everything she believed about herself, her name, her history, her identity, was a fabrication. The woman she called mother was her kidnapper. The life she had lived was built on a foundation of lies. But here is where the story takes its most complicated turn. Kamiyah did not call the police. She did not run. She kept Gloria's secret. For 2 more years, she lived with the knowledge that she had been stolen, and she said nothing. Why? Because Gloria was the only mother she had ever known. Because confronting the truth meant losing everything familiar. Because love, even misguided love, is powerful enough to silence the loudest doubts. Kamiyah later explained that despite what Gloria had done, she had been raised well. She had been cared for. She had been loved, in the only way Gloria knew how to love. And Kamiyah could not bring herself to destroy the woman who had given her that life, even if that life was built on a crime. The weight of that secret was immense. Kamiyah carried it to school, to work, to every family gathering. She carried a screenshot of the composite image police had distributed 18 years earlier, the digital rendering of what she might look like as a teenager. She looked at it and saw herself. She knew who she was. And she stayed silent. But secrets, no matter how tightly held, have a way of escaping. In 2016, Kamiyah tried to get a job. She needed documents, a social security card, a birth certificate, proper identification. Gloria could not provide them. The documents did not exist because Kamiyah Mobley, the girl who was supposed to have died or vanished forever, had never been formally registered under her new name. The system was beginning to close in. Around the same time, someone, a high school friend of Kamiyah's, someone who had grown suspicious over the years, contacted the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. They reported their suspicions about a young woman in Walterboro, South Carolina, who looked remarkably like a missing baby from Florida. The tip sat in a database, waiting for someone to connect the dots. In January 2017, investigators with the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office received the information they had been waiting nearly 2 decades to hear. A possible match. A woman in South Carolina. DNA testing would confirm everything. Detective work began in earnest. Authorities compared photographs of Kamiyah, now 18 years old, with the original images from 1998. The resemblance was undeniable. The birthmarks matched. The timeline aligned. But they needed proof beyond photographs. On January 13, 2017, officers arrived at Gloria Williams's home in Walterboro. They knocked on the door. Gloria answered. Her hands trembled. Behind her, Kamiyah watched, her heart racing. The officers explained why they were there. They asked Gloria to submit to DNA testing. Gloria refused. Kamiyah was defiant, protective. My mom is not a kidnapper, she told the investigators. Nobody is going to tell me that. But the officers had enough evidence to arrest Gloria Williams on charges of kidnapping and interference with custody. They took her into custody while Kamiyah watched, tears streaming down her face. DNA testing was conducted. The results came back within days. Kamiyah Mobley was alive. She was the baby stolen from University Medical Center 18 years earlier, and her biological mother, Shanara Mobley, had never stopped looking for her. The news spread across the country. Headlines called it a miracle. A baby kidnapped at birth, found alive 18 years later, and the longest child abduction case ever solved in the history of the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, and the first in which the victim herself had played no role in her discovery. But for the people at the center of this story, miracle felt like the wrong word. Shanara Mobley received the call she had prayed for every day since 1998. Her daughter was alive. Her daughter was coming home. She wept with a grief and joy so intertwined that she could not separate them. 18 years, 18 birthdays, 18 Christmases, first words and first steps and first crushes. All of it stolen, all of it gone. And now, her daughter was a stranger, an adult, a woman with her own memories, her own loyalties, her own complicated feelings about who her mother really was. When Shanara and Kamiyah met face to face for the first time since that hospital room in 1998, the reunion was not the tearful embrace that television movies promise. It was awkward, stilted, two strangers bound by blood, separated by a chasm of lost time. Kamiyah did not know how to love this woman, who was, biologically, her mother. And Shanara did not know how to reach the daughter who had been raised by someone else. I didn't know how to feel, Kamiyah later said. I had spent my whole life with someone who wasn't my real mother, and now I was supposed to just switch? The reunion with her biological father, Craig Aiken, was similarly complicated. He had been released from prison years earlier and had never given up hope of finding his daughter. But meeting her as an adult, after missing her entire childhood, again was both a blessing and a wound that would never fully heal. Gloria Williams pleaded guilty to kidnapping in February 2018. At her sentencing, Kamiyah submitted a letter asking for leniency. "She raised me with everything I needed," Kamiyah wrote. "My mother is no felon." The judge sentenced Gloria to 18 years in prison, 1 year for every year she had kept Kamiyah from her biological family. Kamiyah attended the hearing. She cried when the sentence was read, and then she visited Gloria in jail, as she would continue to do for years afterward. She still called her Mama. The years following the discovery were not easy for anyone involved. Kamiyah Mobley struggled to build a relationship with the daughter she had lost. The two had periods of closeness and periods of estrangement. At times, Kamiyah admitted publicly that the reunion had brought as much pain as joy. "Sometimes I wish they never would have found her," she once told a reporter. "I'm still lost. I don't have a relationship with my child. What did I gain?" Kamiyah, for her part, worked to maintain connections with both families. She moved between Florida and South Carolina, between her biological relatives and the people who had raised her. She legally changed her name back to Kamiyah, but continued to answer to Alexis when in South Carolina. She was, in every sense, a person divided between two identities, two lives, two versions of herself. In 2019, Kamiyah moved to Jacksonville to live with her biological father, Craig Aiken. It was a step toward healing, toward building something new from the wreckage of what had been taken from her. But she never abandoned Gloria Williams. She continues to visit her in prison. She continues to call her mother. Gloria Williams is serving her sentence at Hernando Correctional Institution. In 2022, she filed a motion asking the court to reduce her sentence to 9 years. Kamiyah submitted a handwritten letter in support, writing, "I would like to make it very clear that she is my mother." The motion was denied. The story of Kamiyah Mobley forces us to confront questions that have no easy answers. Who is a mother? The woman who gives birth, or the woman who raises a child? What does justice look like when the victim loves the perpetrator? How do we punish a crime without punishing the innocent people caught in its wake? Kamiyah lost her identity, her biological family, her sense of self. Kamiyah lost 18 years with her firstborn daughter. Gloria lost her freedom and, eventually, the child she had stolen. Everyone paid a price. No one won. But perhaps there is something to be learned from the way Kamiyah has navigated her impossible situation. She has refused to hate. She has refused to choose sides. She has held space for the grief and the love, the anger and the forgiveness, the biological truth and the emotional truth. She has insisted, against all expectations, that she can love two mothers, even when one of those mothers committed an unforgivable act. If you have ever had to forgive someone who hurt you, you know that forgiveness is not the same as forgetting. It is not condoning. It is not pretending the wound was never made. It is simply choosing, every day, to carry that wound without letting it consume you. Kamiyah Mobley was stolen at 8 hours old. She was found at 18 years old. Today, she is in her mid-20s, still navigating the aftermath of a crime that defined her life before she could even understand what a life was. This is the story of one phone call, one tip, one moment when someone finally spoke the truth. But it is also the story of everything that came before and everything that came after. The years of searching, the years of silence, the years of healing that may never be complete. Do not underestimate the power of speaking up. Do not assume someone else will make the call. Do not let fear of involvement silence you when you know something is wrong. Comment, "Truth," if you believe that speaking up can save lives. Subscribe if you want more stories of families torn apart and brought back together. Or share this with someone who needs to be reminded that the truth, no matter how painful, is always worth pursuing. Kamiyah Mobley spent 18 years living as someone else. but she never stopped being who she was. And in the end, that was enough.